Before we drift into tonight's tale of the disturbing Adventure Time episode, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. Adventure Time is often remembered for its bright colors, its playful jokes, and the feeling of stepping into a candy-coated dream. The land of Ooh sparkles with whimsy, every corner alive with strangeness that somehow feels comforting. Finn and Jake wander through meadows, fight monsters, and make friends in kingdoms built from sugar and rainbows. Yet anyone who has journeyed long enough through this world knows there are places where the dream turns slightly, and the familiar begins to feel unfamiliar. Tonight we descend gently into one of those places, an episode that at first may seem like any other, silly, surreal, and curious. But as the minutes unfold, it reveals itself to be something far stranger, something that stays with you after the screen fades to black, not because of a loud fright or sudden shock, but because of a quiet disturbance that nestles into the mind. Adventure Time has always carried this duality. It is a story meant for children, but layered with hints of tragedy, loss, and an apocalyptic past that older viewers cannot ignore. When the series takes us by the hand and leads us into its darker corners, we are reminded that Ooh is not just a playground. It is a broken world, reshaped after disaster, haunted by what came before. And so when the show chooses to lean into the unsettling, it does not need to scream or shout. The disturbance lies in what is implied, what lingers between the frame, what whispers when no character is speaking. Think about how a dream shifts when the colors dim. You are walking through a familiar field, soft grass beneath your feet, when suddenly the wind grows colder and the trees seem taller, heavier, more watchful. The field has not changed much, but the feeling has. That is what this episode captures, a sense that Ooh itself is breathing different. As we explore it together tonight, I want you to notice the atmosphere, the way sound plays a role in guiding our emotion, the subtle way characters pause, frame lingers just a little longer than expected. These are the signals that something is amiss. Adventure Time often teaches us to listen between the notes, to look between the lines, and here those spaces grow heavy, filled with a quiet tension. In the beginning, it might seem playful. A joke is told, a strange character wanders in, a problem arises. But beneath the humor lies something else, something faintly hollow. This is the mark of disturbing storytelling within Adventure Time. It hides in plain sight. You laugh, but the laughter carries an echo that feels slightly wrong. When we talk about disturbing moments in animation, people often expect grotesque monsters or sudden violence. But Adventure Time rarely goes down that path. Its disturbance is subtler. It arrives through imagery that twists just enough to unsettle, or through themes that touch on fears we all carry deep inside. Fear of loneliness, fear of being forgotten, fear of losing control. This is why so many viewers remember this episode long after watching it. It does not simply entertain. It burrows into the mind, reminding us of emotions we would rather leave unspoken. And yet, as strange as it feels, there is beauty in that discomfort. It proves how powerful storytelling can be, even when wrapped in candy color, playful voices. The land of Ooh, after all, is a dream built on the ruins of an old world. The Mushroom War left scars across the earth, and though most episodes gloss over that history with whimsy, certain ones allow us to glimpse the truth. This disturbing episode fits into that larger picture. It is like lifting a curtain for a moment only to find shadows moving just out of sight. The first time you watch, you may not even realize what is happening. Perhaps it is the silence between the lines that unsettles you. Perhaps it is the way a smile lingers too long or a voice drops too low. And when the credits roll, you find yourself wondering, why did that feel so strange? Why am I still thinking about it? That is the quiet genius of Adventure Time. As we retell this episode tonight, I will guide you slowly through the details, not rushing, not skipping past the little things, because it is often the smallest brushstrokes that make the whole painting unsettling. Imagine sitting by a campfire and listening to a friend recount a dream that made no sense, yet somehow felt deeply important. That is the mood we will carry, a quiet unraveling, step by step. Even the most lighthearted shows can carry shadows, and in Adventure Time, those shadows remind us that laughter and unease often walk hand in hand. By leaning into the strange, the series asks us to consider what lies beneath joy, what memories linger beneath the surface of play. And so, dear listener, we take our first step into this disturbing tale, not with fear, not with urgency, but with curiosity. What lies ahead is not meant to frighten you awake, but to stir your imagination gently, like ripples on water at dusk. When we think about the rhythm of Adventure Time, it often feels like a song. Bright chords at the start, playful verses, and then sometimes a haunting note slips in, one that lingers longer than the rest. This disturbing episode is that haunting note, quiet but unmistakable, echoing in the mind like the hum of a faraway bell. The story begins simply, as most episodes do. Finn and Jake set out on what seems like an ordinary adventure. Perhaps they are answering a call for help, or perhaps they are following their own curiosity. The sun may still be shining, the colors of the Candy Kingdom still bright, but listen closely, and you will sense a different energy underneath it all. Even before anything obviously unusual happens, the tone is shifting. Backgrounds often play a larger role in Adventure Time than we realize. In this episode, the horizon feels emptier, the sky is more muted, and the shapes of buildings slightly unfamiliar. They are still drawn in the same playful style, yet there is an uncanny air to them, like walking down a street you know well, only to realize that a single house has changed its color, or a familiar window no longer faces the same way. These details are small, but they set the stage. Finn, usually brimming with confidence and courage, seems more subdued here. His voice, still youthful, carries traces of hesitation. Jake, normally the comfort in every situation, shifts in tone too, his words stretching longer, his eyes scanning the space and sense something invisible. It is in these subtle changes, the hesitation, the long pauses, that we begin to understand. This is not a typical quest. The episode invites us to notice what is missing. Often in Adventure Time, music fills the background with playful tunes, guiding us through scenes. Here, silence takes the lead. Long stretches without melody leave us listening to the sound of the wind, the creak of a door, the quiet rustle of unseen things. Silence in animation is never accidental, and here it becomes a character of its own, a presence that fills the gaps where joy would normally reside. Disturbance is not always about what we see. Sometimes it is about what we don't see, a shadow that should not be there, a smile that lasts too long, a doorway that seems wider than it ought to be. These are the tiny fractures in the dream of Ooh, and this episode leans on them with great care. It allows us to notice them at our own pace, without pushing, without declaring anything outright, and that is why it feels so effective. Many who first encounter this episode describe the sensation as uneasy, but difficult to explain. They cannot quite name what felt wrong, only that something was wrong. This is storytelling that works like a dream, bypassing logic and going straight to emotion. You know the dream made you feel anxious, even if you cannot describe the details when you wake. The episode lives in that same space, whispering unease without ever raising its voice. This is where Adventure Time proves its strength. It shows us that disturbance does not need sharp edges. It can be soft, almost gentle, and still powerful. The same world that gives us bright candy people and silly songs can also offer quiet dread, the kind that makes you question what is hidden just off-screen. And because the world is so whimsical most of the time, the unsettling moments feel all the stronger, like ink spilled across a brightly painted canvas. As Finn and Jake wander further into the story, they encounter characters that seem familiar yet strange, expressions that falter, voices that waver, faces that don't quite hold together. The effect is never grotesque. It is more like looking at a mask and realizing suddenly that it does not blink. For children, it may pass as odd. For older viewers, it touches something deeper, an instinct that something is not as it should be. Every disturbing tale needs a turning point, and this episode has one that arrives without fanfare. A room entered, a sound heard, a sight glimpsed for a moment too long. The transition is seamless, but once you cross it, you know you have entered another layer, like stepping into a cave where the air is cooler, denser, filled with echoes. It is here that the disturbing quality becomes unavoidable. And yet, even at its most unsettling, the episode is not cruel. Adventure Time rarely is. The unease does not come from watching characters suffer needlessly, but from the way the world bends around them. It is as though Ooh itself is revealing one of its scars, showing us that its surface joy cannot completely hide what lies beneath. This, more than anything, is what lingers in the memory. As we sink deeper into this episode, we begin to see how deliberate the pacing is. Nothing is rushed. The show does not want to shock us. It wants us to dwell, to sit in the stillness, to notice the flickering of a candle, the emptiness of a hallway, the way Finn and Jake's eyes widen, just slightly more than usual. These details are like stepping stones, guiding us across a quiet river towards something we cannot yet name. The beauty of Adventure Time is that it trusts its viewers. It trusts that we will feel the unease even if nothing is explained outright. It trusts that we will carry the discomfort forward, piecing together meaning at our own pace. This disturbing episode, more than most, is built on that trust. It lets silence and subtlety do the work, knowing that the imagination of the audience will fill in the rest. And so, in this gentle descent, we are not being pulled suddenly downward. We are gliding softly into deeper waters. The world of Ooh looks almost the same as always, but listen closely, and you will hear a different heartbeat, slower, heavier, echoing through the halls of this story. As the journey deepens, you may notice how the framing of each scene feels slightly altered. The camera lingers just a little too long, or it cuts away just before you expect. These subtle shifts are part of what make the episode so quietly unsettling. We are used to the playful rhythm of Adventure Time, quick gags, colorful transitions, bursts of music. Here, those rhythms are slowed, stretched thin like shadows at sunset. It makes even ordinary actions feel charged with hidden weight. Imagine Jake stretching to open a door. Normally, this would be a light-hearted gag, his body bending in impossible ways, a smile across his face. But in this episode, the movement feels slower, less joyful. The creak of the door is louder than usual, echoing into the silence. The joke never comes. Instead, the sound of wood groaning in the dark hangs in the air, and the characters hesitate before stepping inside. Small details like this teach us to pay attention, to feel rather than just watch. The world itself becomes a character. The land of Ooh, which so often feels like a place of wonder, reveals another face. Walls lean closer. Corridors feel longer. The colors are muted, not in a way that draws immediate alarm, but in a way that leaves the heart unsettled. It is as though the land is reminding us, I am not always a playground. I have history, and I carry wounds. For long-time viewers, these moments connect back to the apocalyptic roots of the series. Ooh is built on the ruins of what came before, the remnants of the Mushroom War scattered beneath the surface. Most of the time, the show hides this truth beneath candy-colored whimsy. But here, the illusion thins. We are allowed to glimpse the world's fragility, and it feels like walking into a forgotten memory, one the Earth itself would rather keep buried. And still, the unease grows, not from overt horror, but from suggestion. Adventure Time is careful in how it disturbs. The camera might focus on an empty hallway, its darkness stretching further than the eye can see. Or it might linger on a character's silence, their face frozen just long enough to seem unnatural. We wait for a line, for a laugh, for something to break the tension. But nothing comes. The silence continues, heavier and heavier, until it feels like another presence has entered the scene. The brilliance of this episode lies in how it unsettles without ever truly explaining. We are not told why the air feels heavy or why a character's smile doesn't seem quite right. We are left to interpret, to wonder, to project our own feelings onto the space. And because of that, the unease becomes deeply personal. Each viewer brings their own fears into the silence, filling it with shadows unique to them. Finn, though brave, is still a child. His eyes, wide and uncertain, reflect our own discomfort. He moves forward because that is what he always does. His duty as a hero is to push through. But here, even his determination feels fragile, as though he knows this adventure is different. Jake, usually the comforter, does not fill the silence with jokes. Instead, his tone is cautious, his words chosen more carefully. The brothers sense what we sense, that something beneath the surface has shifted. Sometimes, the most disturbing thing is not the monster we see, but the absence of one. In this episode, much of the unease comes from waiting, expecting, holding our breath for something that may never appear. The unseen becomes scarier than the seen. A closed door is left unopened. A shadow passes without explanation. A sound echoes from nowhere and no one comments on it. These gaps are intentional, spaces where our minds wander, imagining possibilities more unsettling than any single answer could provide. And within all of this lies a strange beauty. The episode does not seek to torment. It seeks to remind us that the world of ooh, like our own dreams, carries both joy and unease. The disturbing qualities do not break the world. They deepen it. They show us that even in the most whimsical places, shadows exist, and that shadows can teach us as much as light. Think of the way a lullaby can sound haunting if sung too slowly, or how a child's toy can look eerie when abandoned in the dark. This episode captures that exact feeling. The familiar becomes unfamiliar. The safe becomes slightly unsafe. And through it all, we as the audience are guided, not pushed. We are allowed to notice, to linger, to drift in and out of awareness like a dream slowly turning strange. As the segment unfolds, we begin to see that the unease is not random. It is carefully woven into the very structure of the story. Each pause, each muted background, each half-finished joke serves a purpose. They guide us gently into a state of disquiet so that by the time the episode reaches its core, we are already prepared to feel its weight. The descent has been so gradual that we hardly notice the shift, and yet we now find ourselves in a place far darker than where we began. This is the true artistry of Adventure Time's disturbing sound. It does not shock for the sake of shock. It does not seek to frighten with loud noises or sudden twists. Instead, it embraces subtlety, crafting an experience that feels dreamlike, uncanny, and quietly unforgettable. And as we sink deeper into this tale together, the strangeness will only continue to grow. The deeper Finn and Jake move into the episode's setting, the more we sense that the world around them is shifting into unfamiliar territory. They walk the same way they always do, their dialogue still carrying traces of humor, yet the environment betrays a different story. A hallway stretches longer than expected. A door frame towers overhead in unnatural scale, and the colors of the background lean ever so slightly toward gray. These are not overt horrors, but quiet disruptions in the dream, almost as though ooh itself is sighing beneath the weight of its hidden history. We as viewers begin to notice patterns that unsettle us without ever being spelled out. Perhaps an object appears in the background twice, in places where it should not logically be. Perhaps a character's face holds an expression a fraction too long, creating the illusion of a mask rather than a living being. These are the details that children might overlook, but that older eyes cannot forget. They invite us to wonder, is this the same ooh we know, or is it one of its darker reflections? The episode's strength lies in its restraint. Where another show might rely on loud music or startling visual, Adventure Time simply leans into stillness. It lets the camera rest on a figure standing motionless, or an empty space where something should be. The silence speaks louder than any scream could. And in that silence, we begin to feel that the story is not just about Finn and Jake. It is about us, the watchers, invited to share in their unease. Finn continues forward, his bravery undimmed, but clearly tested. He clutches his sword, not with the eagerness of a hero charging into battle, but with the hesitation of a boy trying to steady his heartbeat. Jake stretches cautiously, his usual banter replaced by murmurs. Even the bravest of friends can feel when the air thickens. And in this episode, they show us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to step forward despite it. There is a moment, quiet, almost easy to miss, where the background hum of the world seems to stop altogether. No bird song, no wind, only stillness heavy and total. In that instant, the line between show and dream blurs. We feel as though we are there with it, standing in a silence so complete it presses against the ears. The screen may be two-dimensional, but the feeling is real, reaching out beyond it. This is the kind of artistry that makes Adventure Time so unique. It understands that the most disturbing sensations often come not from what we see, but from what we feel between the images. The disturbing nature of this episode can also be felt in its theme. Beneath the playful surface of the show lies a constant hum of mortality, loss, and the fragility of life. Candy people may regenerate, princesses may reinvent themselves, and magic may patch over wounds. But the scars of the Mushroom War are always there. This episode touches that scar, pressing gently on it, reminding us that joy in ooh is built upon ruins. That reminder is what makes the unease so powerful. The story is not about horror for horror's sake. It is about memory. It is about how a world can carry the weight of what came before, and how even in bright colors, shadows remain. The disturbing quality of this episode is the recognition that ooh is not as safe as it appears, that behind the candy facades there is history written in ash. And even though the show rarely states this outright, moments like these give us glimpses of that hidden truth. For the audience, especially those drifting off to sleep as they listen, this realization feels both chilling and strangely comforting. Chilling because it breaks the illusion of perfect safety. Comforting because it acknowledges what we all know deep inside, that our own lives too hold shadows beneath the light. Adventure Time reminds us that darkness and whimsy can exist side by side, that even the most magical stories are not free from sorrow. The disturbing atmosphere we sensed in the first steps of this journey now begins to take shape through the story itself. Finn and Jake, as always, move forward with curiosity and courage, but in this particular episode, their path feels heavier. Their quest seems simple at first. No grand mission line to save kingdoms, no call from Princess Bubblegum, just an exploration, a following of strange signs that pull them onward. Yet from the very beginning, we can feel that this is no ordinary adventure. The opening scene shows them walking across a quiet landscape. The fields of Ooh are often drawn bright and lush, but here the palette is subdued. The sky looks pale, and the grass bends under an unseen weight. Jake stretches playfully to hop over a rock, but even that movement feels muted, like his usual joy is being carried away by the still air. Finn hums a tune under his breath, a tune we expect to blossom into something silly, but it trails off instead, unfinished, as his eyes catch sight of something in the distance. What they see first is not frightening, but it is unusual. A structure, worn and leaning, sitting alone at the edge of the field. Adventure Time often introduces strange new places, but this one carries no sign of welcome. No bright colors, no quirky details, just walls that look as though they've been standing too long, waiting without purpose. Finn points it out, and Jake frowns, not in fear, but in unease. His instincts tell him the place is strange, but his loyalty to Finn compels him to follow. Together they approach. The closer they walk, the more details we are given. Cracks spread across the stone like veins, and windows gape like empty eyes. Vines climb the surface, but they are pale and withered, their leaves brittle. There is no sound of birds, no rustle of wind through the grass, only the crunch of their footsteps. It is as though this corner of Ooh has been set aside, forgotten by the rest of the land, left to crumble in solitude. Inside, the tone grows even heavier. The doors open with a groan, and the darkness beyond seems to swallow light. Finn, always ready to dive headfirst, steps inside with determination, but his voice trembles as he calls out a greeting. No one answers. Jake hesitates, his body stretching just enough to keep one foot outside, as though he wants to remain tethered to the safety of the world beyond. This detail tells us much. Even Jake, who so often laughs in the face of danger, feels the weight of this place. The rooms they wander through are sparsely decorated, but each object carries an air of unease. a chair too large for the table beside it, a painting with colors faded into gray, its subject no longer recognizable, a candle burned halfway down, wax hardened as though frozen in time. These are the kind of details that unsettle not because they are threatening, but because they feel abandoned, left behind by something we cannot see. The episode invites us to linger on these images, to feel the silence pressing in around them. Finn and Jake begin to speak more softly, their usual banter replaced with whisper. Finn tries to reassure Jake with bold words, but his tone lacks conviction. Jake mutters that he doesn't like the smell of the place, that the air feels heavy. These exchanges are subtle, but they let us know that both brothers are aware of the strangeness, even if they cannot name it. In one corner, Finn finds a toy. At first glance, it looks like something harmless, perhaps even silly, a doll, a trinket, a leftover from a forgotten time. But when the camera lingers, we notice its face is worn away, its eyes painted too dark, its smile crooked. Jake tells him to put it down, his voice sharper than usual. The toy is never explained, but its presence is enough to unsettle both characters and viewers alike. It is a symbol, perhaps, of childhood left behind, or of something once cherished that has turned uncanny with age. As they press deeper into the structure, the backgrounds become darker. Hallways narrow, shadows lengthen, and doors seem to close on their own. The episode never declares that the place is haunted, but the silence and imagery suggest it. Every step feels as though the walls are watching, leaning closer. Finn clutches his sword tighter, not to fight, but to steady himself, to remind himself of who he is. There is a moment when they pause at a staircase. The steps descend into darkness, and for a long beat, nothing happens. The camera rests on their faces, showing us their hesitation. Finn swallows, and Jake mutters that this is a bad idea, and then Finn begins to move downward. The descent feels slow, each step echoing louder than the last. This scene embodies the essence of the episode. An ordinary action, walking downstairs, turned into something unsettling by silence, framing, and tone. Down below, the rooms are emptier still. The walls are bare, the air feels colder. The absence of life here is louder than any monster could be. It is the void that disturbs us, the emptiness of a place that should hold memory, but instead offers only silence. The rooms Finn and Jake discover in the depths are arranged like echoes of a life once lived. A table set neatly for two, but with plates covered in dust. A bed that looks perfectly made, yet untouched for years, as if its owner had vanished in the middle of a dream. Even a mirror cracked diagonally, reflecting their faces in strange halves. And these objects are ordinary in isolation, but together they whisper of absence, of time halted in a moment of departure. Adventure Time has a way of letting objects speak louder than dialogue. And in this episode, the silence of these rooms becomes its own form of narration. Finn tilts his head, curious but unsettled, while Jake keeps his distance, muttering that he doesn't like the way the walls seem to breathe. The effect is not of outright fear, but of subtle disquiet, a gnawing awareness that the house, or whatever this place is, remembers something that they cannot see. Their exploration grows slower here, almost dreamlike. The pacing of the episode mirrors the act of wandering through an abandoned place in real life, where every creak of the floorboards makes your heart beat a little faster. Finn and Jake's footsteps echo in the silence, and the camera lingers on the small detail, dust motes floating in the dim light, a door that shifts slightly though no one touched it, the sound of something faint moving deep within the wall. It is in these moments that the line between the whimsical world of ooh and the post-apocalyptic ruins beneath it feels most blurred. This forgotten structure could very well be a remnant before the mushroom, a fragment of the old world that survived only to rot away quietly. Adventure Time rarely spells these things out, but the implication is strong. The unsettling atmosphere becomes heavier when we imagine the lives that may have once filled these rooms, the laughter that now exists only as silence. Finn tries to lighten the mood, cracking a small joke about the dust, but his voice echoes strangely in the chamber, carrying farther than it should. Jake gives him a nervous look, as though even Finn's optimism cannot break through the weight of the place. This exchange is subtle, but important. It shows us that even the eternal optimism of youth can falter when the world leans too heavily into silence. And then, a sound. faint but clear enough to stop them both in their tracks. It is not the crash of a monster, not the roar of an enemy, but something quieter, more haunting. A distant tapping, irregular, as though someone or something were knocking faintly against the inside of a wall. The sound fades quickly, replaced again by silence, but it is enough. Jake stiffens, stretching his body closer to Finn, while Finn tightens his grip on his sword. Neither says what they are thinking, but we, the viewers, feel it. The place is not empty yet. They follow the sound deeper into the structure. Hallways narrow further, ceilings drop lower, and the light becomes faint, flickering as if the air itself struggles to carry it. Their dialogue grows sparse now, each word whispered rather than spoken. Jake mutters that they should turn back, but Finn shakes his head. His hero's spirit drives him forward, but even he cannot deny the tension pressing in around them. At one point, they pass a mural painted on the wall. Its colors are faded, but the shapes remain visible. Figures with blank faces standing in circles, their arms reaching toward a dark shape at the center. The painting is never explained. Finn stares at it for a long time, his face unreadable, while Jake avoids looking at it altogether. The mural is left as a fragment of mystery, a relic of whatever this place once represented, and its ambiguity makes it all the more unsettling. As they continue, they come to a room unlike the others, larger, more open, with a high ceiling that disappears into shadow. The floor is bare except for a single object at its center, a chair. Its wood is cracked, its surface worn, but it sits upright as though waiting. Finn approaches carefully, while Jake mutters that he has a bad feeling about it. Finn runs his hand along the chair's surface, and for a moment, the camera lingers on his reflection in the polished wood. His face looks unfamiliar, distorted by the uneven grain. What makes this scene disturbing is not what happens, but what doesn't. Nothing jumps from the shadows, no monster appears, but the stillness of that room with the solitary chair at center feels charged with something unseen. It is a reminder that emptiness can hold more weight than presence, that silence can scream louder than noise. Jake insists they leave, his voice trembling slightly. Finn hesitates, glancing around the room as though expecting something more to reveal itself, but nothing comes, only the same heavy quiet. At last he nods, and together they turn back toward the hallway. The camera lingers on the chair for one last moment before fading to black, leaving the image burned in our mind. They retrace their steps through the narrow hall, and the air seems heavier than before, as if every breath carries a trace of dust and memory. The faint tapping returns, not quite rhythm, not quite random, as though the place itself were trying to form a word. Finn raises a hand for quiet, and Jake stills, his ears lifting, his eyes narrowing. The sound leads them toward a doorway they had missed, a thin seam in the wall where the shadows had pooled too thickly to notice it. Finn presses his palm to the seam and feels a slight tremble. A hidden latch gives way with a soft click. The door opens inward, and a draft of colder air touches their faces. The space beyond is narrow, a stairwell cut from stone, with steps worn shallow by feet that must have passed long ago. Finn looks to Jake, and Jake nods, not with eagerness, but with the steady acceptance of a friend who will not let the other walk alone. They begin to descend. Each step speaks, a muted scrape, a soft complaint. The walls are close enough that their shoulders brush the cold surface. Down below, somewhere beneath the floor of the room with the chair, the tapping grows clearer. It is softer than knuckles and sharper than a branch. It sounds like a tool in the hands of someone who does not want to be noticed. At the base of the stairs, the passage opens into a cellar. The ceiling is low and latticed with old beams. The room is nearly empty except for a shelf, a small trunk, and a clock upon the far wall. The clock face is cracked, and its hands are frozen at a late hour. Finn waits for the beat of ticking and hears nothing at all. The silence around the clock feels heavy, as if time itself had stepped out of the room and left the shell behind. On the shelf sits a book with no title on its spine. Dust rises when Finn touches it. He carries it to the trunk and sets it down carefully. The leather is dry and soft at the edges. A strap once held it closed, but it has snapped, and the pages inside are slightly fanned like a breath caught halfway. Finn opens to the first page and finds no words, only faint impression where a hand once pressed hard enough to leave a memory in the paper. Turn after turn, there are smudges, small shapes, lines that may once have been writing, lifted away by time or light or something else. The suggestion of meaning lingers, but the words are gone. Jake circles the room, stretching a little to peer into corners while keeping his paws close to the floorboards. He sniffs and frowns. There's a scent here he cannot name. Not rot, not smoke. Something thin and metallic, like the air before a storm. He whispers that the tapping is gone, and only then do they both realize it stopped the moment the door opened. Finn closes the book and sets it back, then kneels at the trunk. The trunk lid resists, then opens with a small sigh. Inside are everyday objects that now look like artifacts. A folded scarf, pale with age, a handful of marbles that no longer shine, a wooden figure with arms held out, its face rubbed smooth by fingers that must have turned it over and over. Finn touches the figure and feels a trace of warmth where there should be none, as though the object still remembers the hand that held it last. The clock, silent on the wall, draws their eyes again. Finn steps closer. The glass is spidered with fine cracks that catch the dim light. Behind the glass, the second hand sits between two numbers as if arrested mid-choice. There's a faint reflection of Finn in the glass. For a moment, the reflection seems to look back at him with an expression that does not match his own. It passes in an instant. He blinks, and the image is ordinary. He tells himself it was a trick of angle and shadow. They speak softly in that room, voices nearly swallowed by the stillness. Jake suggests that they mark their paths so they can find their way back. Finn agrees and draws a small symbol on the cellar wall with a piece of chalk he keeps for maps. The chalk line leaves a bright stroke on the stone. It looks stark against the muted palette of the room, a note of the present inside a space that belongs to the past. When they turn to leave, the air seems to shift. It is not a gust nor a breeze. It is a sense, like a weight-changing position on a bed. The door at the top of the stairs remains open, but the stairwell looks longer than before. The perspective has stretched, as if the house has taken a deeper breath. Jake mutters that the steps were not this many. Finn counts under his breath as they climb and loses track halfway. The number does not matter. What matters is that they keep moving, and that the open rectangle of the doorway waits above with its quiet square of light. Back in the corridor, the tapping does not return. The mural on the wall looks a shade darker, though neither of them has touched it. Finn studies the blank faces in the circle and feels a tug of pity for shapes that cannot look back. The dark center of the painting feels like a closed eye. He looks away first. There is another door not far from the hidden stair. It stands open, a sliver. From within comes the faintest sound, like breath drawn and held. Finn nudges it with his boot, and the hinges complain in a voice that seems too human for metal. The room beyond is small, with a window that faces a yard of pale grass. A desk sits under the window, and on the desk rests a glass jar. Inside the jar is a single moth, its wings still. For a long moment, Finn thinks it is dead. Then, with the slow patience of creatures that have learned to wait, the wings lift and fall once, a whisper of powder and light. Jake steps backward and bumps the doorframe. The moth settles again and returns to stillness. Finn lifts the jar gently. The lid is loose. He could free the moth with a twist. He pauses. The house feels watchful, and in that watchfulness lies a question. Is the jar a prison or a shelter? Finn sets it back down without opening. The gesture carries a tenderness. It stands out against the unease. Small kindnesses feel louder in quiet room. On the desk beside the jar lies a key on a length of frayed ribbon. The key is old and simple, with no ornament and a bit of rust on the teeth. Finn pockets it with a soft promise to return it if he can find where it belongs. Keys in adventure time often open more than doors. They open choices, and sometimes they open memory. As they leave the small room, the light in the corridor has changed, not brighter, not darker, different, as though someone adjusted the world by a measure too small to name. The floorboards hold the print of their steps, yet the dust seems undisturbed. The chair room awaits ahead, and something in Finn wants to skip it, but the story pulls them past the threshold again. The chair sits where it sat before, patient, and indifferent. Finn takes the key from his pocket and studies the room for a lock that might fit. There is none on the wall and none on the floor. Jake points to the base of the chair where a small plate of wood looks newer than the rest. Finn kneels and tests the edge. It lifts. Beneath the plate is a narrow slot, the shape of a keyhole cut into the beam that anchors the chair to the floor. He does not turn the key yet. He holds it above the opening and feels the house listening. Jake whispers that choices matter most when the world is quiet. Finn lowers the key until the teeth touch the metal rim of the hidden lock. The sound is soft and bright, a note in a song we cannot hear the rest of. He looks at Jake. Jake nods. Finn slides the key in and waits, hand steady, breath held. The feeling in the room changes again, not danger, density, as if the story itself were gathering around them, eager to see what might open when a lock that should no longer exist remembers how to turn. The key turns with a resistance that feels almost thoughtful, as if the metal were remembering its purpose after a long sleep. A small click answers, followed by a deeper sound within the floor, a wooden throat clearing somewhere below the chair. The air shifts. The silence that has followed Finn and Jake begins to carry a hum too low to name, a presence that is not a voice and not a wind, but something in between. Beneath the chair, boards separate along a seam and reveal a square of darkness. It is not a trapdoor in the usual sense. The opening is narrow and precise, like a letter slot cut into the house. Finn lowers himself to look. The hole is just wide enough to accept a hand. Inside, nothing moves. The darkness a depth rather than a color. Finn reaches in, slow and careful. His fingers brush cloth that feels like folded paper. He draws it out and finds a bundle wrapped in linen, tied once with the same sort of ribbon that held the key. The knot falls loose at his touch. Inside is a stack of photographs from the old world, their edges silvered with age. Faces look up from a life that is gone, a family under a pale sky, a child holding a wooden figure with arms outstretched, a clock on a wall set to the same late hour as the silent clock in the cellar. Finn turns each picture over. Some have a trace of handwriting in a script that has faded almost to nothing. Jake stands close, shoulder touching Finn, and peers with it. He does not crack a joke. He does not fill the room with chatter. He simply looks, and his ears lower with a tenderness that suits the quiet weight of what they are holding. Together they place the photographs back into the linen and tie them shut again. The house seems to relax at this gentleman, like a creature that has been seen without being harmed. The slot closes on its own when Finn removes the key. The chair settles back with a small sigh. Finn holds the key a moment longer and then returns it to his pocket. In a different story, they might carry away the bundle for answers. In this one, they understand that some artifact belonged to the rooms that kept them safe. Respect is a kind of language, and the house has taught them a few of its words. They step into the corridor. The tapping does not return. The mural waits with its circle of blank faces and the dark center that feels like a closed eye. Finn raises his chalk to mark the frame of the chair room and stops, letting the chalk rest. The mark would be accurate. It would also be loud in a place that prefers whisper. He puts the chalk away. Jake nods as if the choice matches a thought. He did not say. They climb toward the main level. The air grows warmer by a degree that is impossible to measure and easy to feel. Near the entry hall, a door they had not noticed before stands ajar. Inside lies a simple kitchen. A kettle sits on a cold stove. 2 cups wait side by side. Finn is about to call out a greeting born from habit, then remembers where they are and bows his head instead. Jake brushes a fingertip over the rim of a cup and withdraws it quickly, surprised. The porcelain holds a trace of warmth that should not be there. A hairline crack threads the kettle from spout to handle. Finn touches it and feels a vibration, faint as the last echo of a bell. He lifts the lid. No water, only scent. It is the same thin, metallic air from below, tempered now by something like tea leaves that were never steeped, the suggestion of a ritual interrupted. 2 cups for 2 people who did not return. On a small shelf above the stove rests a music box. Its paint is worn to the wood at the corners, and a star is scratched on the lid by a hand that may have been young. Finn turns the key at its side by a single notch and lets go. The box does not play a tune. Instead, it opens a fraction, and a single, soft chime rises and fades. In the quiet that follows, the kitchen seems to lean nearer. Jake whispers that maybe the house is not haunted at all. Maybe it is only lonely. They leave the music box as they found it and step back into the hall. The light through the front door is paler than it was when they entered, as if a thin cloud has drifted across the sun. Finn glances to the fields outside and then looks down at his hands, as though uncertain whether he has touched dust or memory. Jake asks if they are done. Finn listens to the house, to the silence, to the way the boards beneath their feet have stopped speaking. He nods. At the threshold, Finn hesitates. He takes the key from his pocket and places it on a small hook beside the door. The sort of hook where a family might have once kept it for errands and returns. The ribbon hangs limp, then stirs as if moved by breath. Finn presses his palm to the doorframe in a quiet farewell. Jake mirrors the gesture, paw flat against the wood. The door closes behind them with a sound that feels like a word we do not know how to translate. Outside, the field is the same and not the same. The grass still bends under a wind they cannot feel. Far away, a bird crosses the sky. The colors remain subdued, but the heaviness is thin. Finn looks back only once. The house stands in its old posture, but its windows no longer seem like empty eyes. They seem like eyes that have finished watching. As they walk, their steps regain a natural rhythm. Jake stretches a little farther, spine loosening, voice warmer. Finn hums the tune he began at the start of their journey, and this time it reaches the next line. Yet the unease does not vanish. It settles beside them like a low tide that reveals the shape of rocks beneath the water. They are not afraid, they are aware. Adventure Time often returns from its darker corners with a gift. Not answers, not neat lessons, a feeling, a memory, a thread that will connect to something later in a way we cannot yet see. This episode gives them and us a thread woven from silence, respect, and a house that held its secrets without malice. It reminds us that ooh is layered. On top, candy and laughter. Beneath, rooms that still remember the lives that once filled them. Near the edge of the field, Finn pauses and turns his head. The faintest chime reaches them from the direction of the house, no louder than a distant spoon touched to glass. Jake hears it too. They do not go back. They do not run. They stand a moment in the pale light, honoring a sound that may have been wind through a cracked kettle, or the closing note of a music box that remembered its song at last. They continue toward the path that will carry them to brighter places. Behind them, the house grows small and then becomes part of the horizon. In front of them, the land of Ooh opens in its familiar quilt of meadows and quiet forests. Yet the world is altered in a way that cannot be drawn. The disturbing quality that guided the story does not end at the door. It walks with them, soft and steady, an understanding that light is truer when it has passed through shade. Finn and Jake speak at last in full voices. They trade a few gentle lines about the chair, the key, the photographs, and the moth in the jar. None of these details would frighten a child. All of them will stay with an older heart. Finn says that sometimes helping means leaving things where they belong. Jake says that sometimes a house asks for company and then needs quiet. Neither claims to know what the tapping was or why the clock stopped or who painted the circle of faces. They accept that not every door opens onto a lesson with a name. The sun lifts a little and the palette warms by a shade. The day is not bright. It is enough. Finn sheathes his sword and Jake rolls his shoulders as if setting down a pack. The path bends and a new scene waits beyond the trees. The story of this episode has unfolded not by explaining but by letting us feel a worn structure. Rooms that kept time until time refused to be kept. A key that turned not to reveal a monster but to reveal memory. In the measured quiet of these moments, the unease finds its meaning. It is not a threat. When we step back from the unfolding events of this episode, another layer begins to emerge. The quiet strangeness of the house, the abandoned objects, the flicker of a moth in a jar. These are not simply details added for atmosphere. They are symbols, subtle pieces of imagery carefully chosen to stir something deeper within us. Adventure Time, in its most unsettling moments, rarely declares its meaning outright. Instead, it plants images like seeds in the soil of our imagination and lets them grow slowly in the quiet of our own thoughts. The first image that lingers is the chair at the center of the room. It is plain, almost ordinary, yet its placement makes it heavy with implication. Chairs are for sitting, for waiting, for resting, but here the chair is anchored into the floor, as if whoever placed it wished for it never to move. When Finn unlocks the hidden slot beneath, the chair transforms from furniture into symbol. It becomes a vessel of memory, a guardian of stories too fragile to be left in the open. The fact that it hides photographs, a record of faces and times now erased from the world, suggests that the chair is not only about rest, but about remembrance. It holds what cannot be forgotten, even when time and war have stripped words and voices away. The mural on the wall tells a similar story in different language. Figures drawn in fading paint, their faces blank, arms raised toward a dark center. This circle of forms unsettles us because it mirrors rituals we cannot fully understand. The blankness of their faces removes identity, leaving only shape and posture, as though the mural depicts not people, but echoes of people. Their facelessness might represent how history erases individuality, reducing lives to outlines, or it could hint at something more abstract, that in the pursuit of something vast and incomprehensible, identity itself is surrendered. The dark center, meanwhile, feels like a void, a silent gravity pulling their devotion inward. It could be the memory of destruction, a symbol of the Mushroom War's shadow, or perhaps it is simply a reminder that every circle, no matter how joyful, contains a point of silence at its heart. Then there is the moth in the jar. Gentle, fragile, almost weightless, it flutters only once before returning to stillness. Moths are often drawn to light, yet here it is trapped within glass, unable to follow its instinct. This imagery resonates with themes of containment and longing. The moth is alive, but its freedom has been reduced to a space no wider than its wingspan. Some might read it as a symbol of U itself, a world alive and strange, but held in the jar of its own post-apocalyptic scars. Others might see it as a reflection of Finn and Jake's journey, travelers who seek light, but often find themselves caught in spaces that restrict them. The choice Finn makes, not to free the moth, but to leave it as it is, suggests respect for the boundaries of the moment, and understanding that not every trapped thing can be released without consequence. The clock, too, holds power as an image. Time is constant in most stories, measured and dependable. But in this episode, the clock is broken, its hands frozen at a late hour. The stillness of time suggests more than the abandonment of a home. It hints at the way trauma halts progress, how moments of great weight seem to suspend life itself. For the people who once lived in that house, perhaps time stopped on that very day, leaving the walls to echo a moment forever unfinished. For Finn and Jake, the clock may be a reminder that their world lives in borrowed time, a fragile piece, standing on the ruins of a war that paused history but never truly ended it. Even the smallest details hold meaning when we look closely. The toy with its crooked smile, for example, may not speak aloud, yet its presence unsettles us because toys are meant to embody innocence. Here, innocence itself feels warped, the joy of childhood twisted into something uncanny. It is not monstrous, but it is wrong in a way that cuts deeper than visible danger. It speaks to the fragility of childhood in a world built after collapse, where even playthings cannot escape the shadow of unease. Adventure Time excels at layering these images without telling us what they mean. The unsettling power of this episode lies in how it leaves room for us to interpret. For one viewer, the moth may symbolize fragility. For another, the photographs might stir thoughts of memory and loss. For yet another, the mural may feel like a direct reference to rituals of power and control. The episode does not claim any single meaning, and that openness is part of its disturbing beauty. By refusing to close the circle, it allows the symbols to echo within us, shaping themselves into reflections of our own fears and experiences. And yet none of these images feel hostile. They are not designed to harm, but to remind us that the land of is layered, that beneath its whimsy lies a quiet network of memories, symbols, and scars. These images function like dreams within the dream, strange objects that whisper more than they explain. Watching them unfold is like walking through a gallery where every painting has been blurred by time, yet still radiates its original intention. We cannot read the full story, but we can feel its weight. Among the most striking symbolic threads woven into the episode is the idea of hiddenness itself. Nearly every unsettling object or image is not shown in a loud or obvious way. It is discovered. A chair that only reveals its purpose when a key is found. A mural that waits in silence until noticed. A moth that moves only once, quietly, as if to remind us of its presence before fading again into stillness. This pattern of concealment mirrors the way memory works. The past does not always announce itself. Instead, it lingers in corners, waiting for the right kind of attention to bring it forward. The photographs beneath the chair deepen this theme of hidden memory. They are the most direct image of human life we receive in the episode. Yet even here, the details are half erased. The handwriting is too faint to read. The edges are too worn to reconstruct the full picture. We are given proof of lives that once flourished, but not enough to know who they were or what became of them. This deliberate incompleteness keeps the photographs from being mere exposition. They become an invitation to imagine. Each viewer fills the gaps differently, and in doing so, the photographs become mirrors of our own understanding of loss. Even the act of Finn placing the key back at the door resonates symbolically. A key often represents power, the ability to unlock and possess. But by returning it, Finn transforms it into something gentler, a gesture of respect, a recognition that not every secret should be carried away. This choice aligns with the episode's quiet message that some memories do not belong to us, and that disturbing them further would not bring peace but imbalance. The act of leaving the key behind is itself a kind of offering to the house, acknowledging that what rests within should continue to rest. Jake's instinctive comments about the house being lonely are another layer of symbolic language. Loneliness is a theme often expressed in Adventure Time, though usually through characters rather than places. Here, however, the house itself seems to embody it. Empty rooms, unfinished rituals, objects that still carry warmth. They create the impression of a place that longs for presence, but is unable to have it. When Jake voices this thought, it reframes the imagery of the episode. The unsettling silence becomes less about menace and more about yearning. The disturbing quality arises not from danger, but from the echo of absence. The music box, too, contributes to the sense of yearning. Normally, such an object would spill out a song when wound, but here it offers only a single chime, faint and unfinished. It is like a voice that wanted to sing, but could only utter one note. That lone chime lingers longer than a melody would have because it leaves us waiting for a song that never comes. It symbolizes incompletion, a life interrupted, a memory that will never resolve. Yet it is also delicate, fragile, almost beautiful in its refusal to be whole. The jarred moth, the frozen clock, the faceless mural, the chair guarding its hidden bundle, these images form a constellation, each pointing to the same unspoken truth. The world of Ooh is littered with remnants of what came before, and those remnants cannot be easily explained. They are fragments, not full stories, and the fragments are what disturb us, because they require us to confront mystery. Unlike monsters that can be fought or villains who can be defeated, these symbols cannot be conquered. They can only be acknowledged, respected, and remembered. Adventure Time often flirts with dream logic, and this episode leans into it fully. Dreams speak in symbols because they bypass reason, and that is what the imagery here achieves. The unsettling quality does not come from clarity, but from ambiguity. A moth in a jar could mean many things or nothing at all. A frozen clock might be a simple broken object, or it might be time itself refusing to move. The lack of explanation forces us into the same dreamlike state as Finn and Jake, who can only respond with emotion rather than understanding. There is also significance in how the imagery connects to broader themes of the show. Adventure Time is about survival after catastrophe, about piecing together meaning in a broken world. The faceless figures of the mural could be survivors erased by history. The warped toy could be a reminder that even joy carries scars. The unfinished song of the music box could echo the incomplete stories of countless lives cut short by war. These connections do not need to be spelled out to resonate. They hum quietly beneath the surface, deepening the unease without overwhelming the narrative. And then, of course, there is the silence itself. Silence is perhaps the most powerful symbol in the episode. It fills the gaps between images. It hangs in the pauses between words. It presses down on every object with a weight that cannot be seen. Silence here becomes more than absence of sound. It becomes the voice of the past, a language spoken by spaces rather than characters. It is this silence that binds the imagery together, allowing the chair, the moth, the mural, and the clock to whisper as one chorus. Thresholds carry special meaning in Adventure Time, and in this episode, almost every powerful image sits on or near a threshold. The seam of the hidden door, the lip of the stairwell, the narrow slot beneath the chair, the window above the desk, the hook by the front door where a key comes to rest. Thresholds are choices given shape. They are places where a story could move forward or turn back. By concentrating images at borders, the episode quietly reminds us that unease often rises when we stand between states, neither inside nor outside, neither past nor future. The house becomes a map of edges and entrances, and Finn and Jake move from frame to frame like travelers learning the grammar of a language made of doorways. Light and dust provide their own symbolic grammar. In several rooms, the light is not bright enough to comfort, yet it is not dark enough to hide. The air glitters with dust that rises at the slightest motion. Dust is time you can see. It turns every breath and gesture into a small revelation. When Finn lifts the book, dust climbs like a pale fog, and for a heartbeat, the room looks as if it remembers being full of life. The sparkle fades and the silence settles again. That brief shimmer is a message. Memory is present, but it cannot remain without a living hand to stir it. The episode lets us feel this truth without a single spoken line. Mirrors are another recurring thread. The nearly broken mirror upstairs returns a split image of the boys, a soft statement that identity can be fractured without being destroyed. The clock glass returns Finn's reflection in a way that does not quite match his face. Reflections here are not vanity. They are tests. Are you the same person when seen through a surface that has known years of waiting? Can courage hold steady when reflected through a lens that prefers stillness to motion? The mirror imagery says that selfhood is elastic in yet there is a core that persists, and that persistence is what allows Finn to meet rooms like these with respect rather than force. The mural, with its circle and void, connects to a larger adventure time pattern. Circles in the series often suggest cycles of harm and healing, loss and renewal. The blank faces suggests a cycle broken at the point of memory. If a community loses its names, it retains only gestures, raised arms, gathered bodies, a posture of attention. The void at the center can be read as the silence left by catastrophe, but it can also be read as the space all stories need in order to breathe. The mural disturbs precisely because it asks for interpretation and offers none. Viewers bring their own histories to that ring of figures and find what they fear or what they miss. Objects that invite touch become small altars throughout the house. The wooden figure with worn features, the ribbon on the key, the smooth rim of a cup that still feels warm. In a show that often celebrates action, these objects ask for pause instead. Their function is devotional. Touch with care. Notice without claiming. When Finn returns the key to the hook, the act completes a ritual that the house could not finish on its own. The image becomes a prayer answered not by words, but by placement. Right thing, right place, right time. Even Jake's senses operate symbolically. He names a metallic scent like air before a storm. Storm scent usually precedes change. In a land shaped by a war that remade the sky, the approach of change carries both hope and warning. Here the warning is not about danger. It is about responsibility. If you uncover a story, you become part of it. By acknowledging the scent and then choosing gentleness, Jake turns his nose into a compass that does not point toward treasure, but toward care. Sound design functions as a hidden emblem. The chime of the music box, the single note that hangs and fades, teaches the ear how to listen to absence. A chime is made to begin a melody, and here it does not. That denial is a lesson. Not all beginnings promise a middle and an end. Some beginnings exist to be honored as beginnings. The later chime heard from the field confirms this reading. The house is not calling them back. It is finishing a sentence in a language they now understand. The moth becomes richer the longer we consider it. In many myths, the moth is kin to the soul, drawn to light and altered by it. In a jar, it cannot choose its flight. Yet its small movement proves that longing still lives even where choice is limited. Finn leaves it as found, and that restraint becomes a countersymbol to heroism as conquest. Heroism as care says that freedom without context can harm as easily as help. The jar can be both prison and shelter. The episode trusts the audience to sit with that tension without a tidy answer. Scale carries quiet symbolism as well. Door frames that feel too tall, hallways stretched by a breath, stairs that multiply just enough to unsettle counting. Shifting scale is the house's way of declaring itself alive. Not malicious, simply aware. Ooh often plays with scale to create whimsy. Here it bends scale to create awe. Awe is the twin of fear separated by intention. Because the boys respond with respect, the bending of space remains awe and never curdles into panic. Color tells its own story. The palette is lowered by a few tones, which invites the eye to work harder. When color withdraws, shape and placement step forward. This pulls attention to the posture of objects and the geometry of rooms. It is a painterly trick translated into animation. Lower saturation asks us to honor form over flash, history over spectacle. The result is a feeling that the house wears a veil. We see enough to understand presence, not enough to reduce that presence to decoration. Even the chalk line that Finn considers and then withholds is a potent image. A mark would turn exploration to ownership. By choosing not to mark the stone, Finn refuses the colonizing impulse that often hides inside maps. He keeps the path in his memory rather than on the wall. Memory carried in a person is warmer than memory, etched in a place that asks to remain quiet. The absence of a mark becomes a sign of maturity. We can also read the house itself as a mnemonic palace, a mind made solid, storing fragments that refuse to dissolve. The chair is a memory node. The cellar is long-term storage. The kitchen is the short-term loop, where daily rituals kept life coherent. The mural is a dream logic archive of meaning that could not be voiced in prose. Moving through the house then becomes a walk through a psyche that once held a family and now holds images that protect what names can no longer protect. Finally, the field outside is not merely outside. It is another page of the same book. When Finn and Jake exit, the horizon receives them with a gentler weight, confirming that symbols have done their work. They have been seen without being stripped. The house relaxes, the windows soften, and the world regains a fraction of its color. The shift is small, which is exactly why it matters. In Adventure Time, transformation is often measured in quiet degrees, and this episode teaches us to trust those degrees as signs of real change. Every fragment we've explored, the moth, the clock, the chair, the mural, the music box, forms part of a tapestry that is less about horror and more about memory's presence in ooh. Adventure Time always leaves space for mystery, but here the mystery is embodied in images, not explanations. The episode asks us to notice, to dwell, and to allow silence to carry meaning where words cannot. One of the most haunting images is absence itself. The empty cups in the kitchen, set as if waiting for two people who will never return, linger in the mind longer than any monster could. Cups are simple, ordinary objects, yet their stillness holds the shape of former hands. They remind us that even joy leaves traces in objects. When we see those traces without the people who created them, the ordinary becomes uncanny. The cups stand as symbols of companionship interrupted, of rituals unfinished. The trunk of toys and trinkets carries a similar charge. Toys are meant to be touched, handled, loved until they wear away. Yet here they sit untouched, not because they are unworthy, but because the hands that once played with them are gone. The wear on the wooden figure suggests affection that spanned years. That affection remains imprinted in the grain, even as the story of its owner is lost. In this way, the toy is no longer a toy. It is testimony. Adventure Time gives us testimony in images rather than words, trusting the quiet power of suggestion to disturb us more deeply than explicit exposition ever could. The ribbon on the key threads another symbolic line. Ribbons usually bind gifts or ornaments, but here it binds memory. The fraying of the ribbon shows the erosion of time, yet it still holds. It tells us that memory may weaken, but never fully severs. When Finn returns the key, the ribbon is restored to its place by the door, and the image completes a circle, a fragment rejoined with its rightful threshold. This moment transforms ribbon from decoration into symbol of continuity, reminding us that care can stitch small wounds even when larger wounds remain. Silence, as noted before, functions as the strongest imagery in the episode, but its presence evolves as the story unfolds. In the beginning, silence is oppressive. It fills the rooms, making every creak and echo feel sharper. By the end, silence feels changed. It has absorbed Finn and Jake's respect and grown gentler, more contemplative. The final chime in the distance does not break silence, but crowns it. In this way, silence shifts from symbol of dread to symbol of reverence. It teaches us that disturbance and peace can inhabit the same quiet. Another subtle layer of imagery lies in scale. The exaggerated stairwell, the endless hallway, the overtall door frames, all of these bend proportion just enough to disturb our sense of stability. But scale here is not random. It is symbolic of memory's distortion. When we recall our own past, hallways feel longer, doors taller, rooms larger or smaller than they were. The house embodies memory as lived space, elastic, shifting, uneasy. By exaggerating scale, the episode tells us we are walking not just through a building, but through the remembered architecture of lives that are gone. The entire structure of the episode reflects dream logic. Dreams often present us with symbols without commentary. We wake and recall fragments, a clock that would not tick, a moth that would not fly, a voice that never finished its song. Dreams disturb not by showing us clear danger, but by placing us in spaces that feel wrong in ways we cannot name. Adventure Time leans fully into that dreamlike quality here. The episode itself becomes a dream that refuses to resolve, a narrative that chooses imagery over answers. What makes this approach powerful is that it respects the intelligence of the audience. Children may not analyze the symbols, but they will feel their weight. Adults may search for meaning and find reflections of their own fears and memories. By leaving space for interpretation, the imagery becomes alive in the minds of viewers. It follows them out of the episode, echoing in their own dreams, reshaping itself to fit their inner landscapes. The disturbing quality of this episode, then, is not found in explicit fright. It lies in the way images resonate with truths we know but rarely name. That time can halt, that innocence can warp, that longing can remain trapped, that memory can fade until only shapes endure. And yet, beneath all of this there is tenderness, Finn's restraint, Jake's sensitivity, their choice to leave things as they found them. These responses remind us that even in the face of unease, care is possible. The imagery is unsettling, but the characters' responses teach us how to sit with that unease gently. This is what makes the episode unforgettable. Every object becomes a whisper, every symbol a soft question. None of them answered outright, but all of them carrying meaning that deepens the world of ooh. They disturb us not because they are violent or grotesque, but because they remind us that even in fantastical lands, the marks of absence, loss, and memory cannot be erased. And by recognizing those marks, we learn something about ourselves, that disturbance is not always an enemy, but sometimes a teacher. What makes this episode linger in the mind is not only the imagery itself, but the feelings those images awaken within us. To understand why it unsettles us so deeply, we need to drift into the quiet psychology of unease. Not terror, not shock, but that softer dissonance that moves under the skin like a chill. It is the kind of feeling that sits at the edge of a dream and follows us into waking. Unease often comes from dissonance between what we expect and what we receive. Adventure Time usually greets us with warmth, bright colors, playful song, and the comfort of Finn and Jake's companionship. Yet in this episode, those comforts bend, the colors dim, the music falls silent. The characters' voices hesitate. Nothing terrible happens outright, and yet everything feels off. This subtle bending of the familiar is the essence of unease. Our minds recognize the world, but sense that it is no longer behaving as it should. Children and adults experience this in different ways. For a child, the episode might feel like walking through a familiar home at night when shadows distort every corner. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has. For an adult, the unease might speak to deeper fears. The time erases memory. The places we once loved can fall silent. That warmth can turn cold. The episode bridges both experiences, offering symbols that disturb on levels both simple and profound. One psychological reason this works so powerfully lies in ambiguity. When something is clear, the mind can file it away, explain it, or confront it. But when something is left uncertain, like a tapping with no source, or a mural with no explanation, the mind keeps working long after the moment has passed. Ambiguity extends fear. It transforms a single moment into a lingering question. Our imagination fills the silence with the possibilities, and those possibilities are often more unsettling than any definitive answer could be. Another key to the psychology of unease is stillness. In our everyday lives, movement reassures us. A door that opens, a person who speaks, a clock that ticks, all confirm that the world continues forward. In this episode, stillness dominates. The clock does not move. The moth barely stirs. Even the music box releases only one note. Stillness is deeply disturbing because it implies interruption. Something that should be happening is not. Our minds rush to find meaning in the pause, and in doing so, we experience unease. The episode also taps into childhood fears of abandonment. Empty rooms, unfinished meals, and toys left behind all echo the sense of being forgotten. For a child, this may mirror the fear of losing parents or friends. For an adult, it mirrors the grief of losing loved ones to time. The house embodies abandonment in its every detail, and Finn and Jake walking through it mirrors our own journey through those feelings. Their presence becomes a stand-in for our curiosity, but also for our vulnerability. Silence between the characters carries psychological weight too. Finn's jokes fall flat. Jake's instincts warn but offer no solution. Usually their banter shields us from the darker edges of ooh, but here even their companionship feels strained. This is not to say their bond weakens, only that the house strips away their usual rhythm, leaving us exposed to discomfort without relief. We learn that even the strongest friendships cannot always erase unease. They can only endure it together. There is also the fear of transformation. When Finn sees his reflection distorted in the clock glass, the unease arises not because of what he sees, but because it suggests the possibility of becoming unrecognizable. To see oneself altered in subtle ways is a deeply human fear. The fear that our identity might not be stable, and that time or trauma could reshape us into something we no longer know. The episode leans gently on this fear, never shouting it, but hinting through imagery that identity is fragile. The psychology of unease also thrives on anticipation. The tapping sound, faint and irregular, works because it promises something that never arrived. Anticipation without release builds tension, and tension without resolution transforms into unease. Our bodies brace for an event, but the event never comes. The energy has nowhere to go, so it lingers within us. When the episode ends, that unresolved anticipation remains, haunting us long after the story is finished. All of this unfolds gently, never in a way that overwhelms. The episode disturbs by suggestion, not declaration. And this is why it works so well as bedtime storytelling material. It does not scream for attention, but whispers in tones that the dreaming mind finds irresistible. It teaches us how powerful silence, ambiguity, and stillness can be when arranged with care. Unease also emerges from the way the episode blurs the line between safety and danger. Finn and Jake enter the house without battle, without the clash of blades or the roar of enemies. On the surface, nothing threatens them directly, yet the house itself feels alive in a way that is neither hostile nor friendly. It observes, it shifts, it waits. This ambiguous presence unsettles us because it resists clear classification. If the house were openly malicious, Finn and Jake could fight it. If it were clearly harmless, they could laugh and leave. Instead, it occupies a gray space where neither response feels correct, and our minds struggle to settle. Psychologists often describe this kind of reaction as the uncanny, the sense that something familiar has been made strange. The house is built from familiar parts: a chair, a clock, a kitchen, a mirror. None of these objects are frightening on their own. Yet placed in this setting, stripped of their ordinary rhythm, they become uncanny. They remind us of the everyday, but in ways that are slightly wrong. This wrongness is what disturbs us. It is the sense that the world we trust can twist without warning, that the comfort of the familiar can collapse into unease with the smallest shift. This connects deeply to the nature of dreams. Dreams take what we know and bend it just enough to confuse us. A door is taller, a hallway longer, a face slightly blurred. The mind recognizes the pattern but cannot reconcile the distortion, and unease is born. By recreating this dreamlike quality in its imagery, the episode replicates the psychology of dreaming while we are awake. We watch with the same unsettled acceptance that we feel in a dream, where strange events make sense in the moment, but disturb us afterward. Another layer of unease arises from the idea of incompletion. Nearly every image in the episode is unfinished. The clock no longer ticks. The photographs are half erased. The music box plays only a single chime. Even the mural lacks detail. Its face is blank, its meaning unspoken. Humans crave closure. We want the melody to finish, the text to be legible, the story to resolve. By presenting us with images that deny completion, the episode unsettles us in a fundamental way. We are forced to sit with the discomfort of unfinished story, much like the unfinished story of Ooh itself after the Mushroom War. There is also the psychological effect of contrast. Adventure Time often surrounds us with bright colors, silly jokes, and whimsical characters. Against this background, the disturbing episode feels even darker. The contrast amplifies the unease. It is not simply that the episode is unsettling. It is that it exists within a show usually defined by joy. This contrast mirrors real life, where moments of silence or loss feel sharper precisely because they interrupt periods of happiness. The mind notices the rupture, and the rupture lingers. At the heart of the psychology of unease lies vulnerability. Finn and Jake, though heroic, are still exposed in this episode. Their weapons are of no use against silence. Their courage cannot banish stillness. They must walk through unease without the tools that usually protect them. In this way, they mirror our own vulnerability. We, too, cannot fight silence or ambiguity. We can only endure them. Watching Finn and Jake do so reminds us of our own limits, but also of our own resilience. The episode also awakens unease by reflecting on memory itself. Memories are often comforting, but they can disturb when fragmented or incomplete. The photographs with the fading faces remind us that memory cannot hold everything. The house becomes a symbol of memory's failure, where objects remain but stories vanish. This reflects a quiet fear within us all that we, too, will be forgotten, that our lives will reduce to fragment others cannot fully understand. Such fears are rarely voiced, but they ripple beneath the surface of human thought. The episode stirs those ripples without naming them, leaving us to feel the unease of memories impermanent. And yet unease is not cruelty. The episode never mocks us for these feelings. Instead, it honors them by allowing them space to exist. In this way, it becomes therapeutic. By presenting unease gently, wrapped in the quiet rhythms of ooh, it teaches us how to sit with discomfort without being overwhelmed. It is a bedtime kind of unease, not one that startles us awake, but one that drifts with us into thought, like a dream we cannot quite shake. One of the most delicate threads in the psychology of unease is identity. The distorted reflection in the cracked mirror and the warped image in the clock's glass are not frightening in a literal sense, but they stir a primal discomfort. To see oneself altered even slightly is to question the boundary between who we are and who we could become. The reflection looks like Finn, but not quite. In that sliver of difference lies the fear of losing the self, of becoming unrecognizable to the world and even to our own eye. This subtle distortion resonates because it touches on the fragility of identity, the awareness that who we are is not fixed, but constantly shaped by time, memory, and circumstance. Loneliness plays another powerful role. Jake names the house lonely, and in doing so, he gives language to the emptiness that fills every room. The unease here is not about monsters lurking in shadows, but about absence itself. Humans are social creatures. We long for connection. Empty spaces designed for companionship, 2 cups at a table, a bed carefully made, a music box waiting for children, feel wrong when no voices fill them. The psychology of unease feeds on that mismatch. The house is full of signs of presence, yet no one is present. It embodies loneliness so deeply that we feel it pressing against us, reminding us of our own fear of being left behind. The tapping sound that leads Finn and Jake deeper into the house illustrates another psychological truth: the fear of anticipation. Anticipation can heighten joy, but it can also create dread. A knock with no knocker, a sound with no source. These set the mind spinning, preparing for something that never arrived. When the anticipation is denied, the unease lingers longer than any actual event might. It is the suspended question that disturbs us. What was making the sound? Why did it stop? Our imaginations rush to answer, and in doing so, they create shadows far darker than any animated figure could provide. The unfinished music box chime extends this idea of suspended expectation. We turn the key and brace ourselves for melody, but receive only a single note. The psychology of this moment is subtle, but powerful. We are conditioned to expect patterns, beginnings that lead to middles and ends. When a pattern is interrupted, we feel unmoored, denied the comfort of completion. The unease comes not from the sound itself, but from the silence that follows, the silence that says, there should have been more, but there wasn't. Another psychological element at play is the contrast between movement and stillness. The moth stirs once, wings rising with fragile beauty, and then settles again to stillness. That single movement is unsettling precisely because it is rare. In an environment dominated by silence and stillness, any motion becomes charged with significance. The viewer holds their breath, waiting for more, and when no more come, the unease deepens. The psychology here is simple. We trust motion to continue, and when it stops, we feel betrayed by our own expectations. The warped toy, with its crooked smile, illustrates how innocence itself can create unease when altered. Toys represent safety, joy, and the simplicity of childhood. When a toy is distorted, eyes too dark, smile uneven, it unsettles us because it twists something we rely on for comfort. The psychology here is tied to betrayal of trust. Objects we associate with play should not look threatening, and when they do, our sense of safety collapses. The unease is amplified by the knowledge that children once held that toy with love, yet now it carries a shadow. We also find unease in the subtle stretching of space, stairs that seem longer than they should, halls that extend further than expected. These disruptions play with our innate sense of orientation. Humans rely on spatial consistency for security. When the environment shifts even slightly beyond logic, the body reacts with discomfort. The psychology of distorted space is not about danger, but about dislocation. The world should behave predictably, and when it does not, we feel the uncanny weight of being somewhere that should not exist. The absence of music adds another layer. Adventure Time often uses playful songs to comfort and entertain, but here the music is stripped away. Silence is not just the absence of sound, it becomes a presence in itself, shaping the mood of every scene. From a psychological perspective, silence draws attention to small details, making every creak, sigh, or breath more significant. The unease is not in what we hear, but in how much louder the world feels without melody to soften it. Perhaps the deepest psychological trigger in this episode is impermanent. Every image points to a clock stopped, photographs fading, toys abandoned, a music box unable to play its song. All remind us that nothing lasts forever. For children, this impermanence may feel confusing, but intriguing. For adults, it touches directly on mortality, the awareness that our own stories, too, will fade into fragments. The unease is not fear of death itself, but fear of erasure. Fear that what we love and who we are might dissolve into silence without remembrance. Yet the episode does not present these truths as cruelty. Instead, it frames them within gentleness. Finn and Jake are unsettled, yes, but they do not despair. They respond with care, with restraint, with respect, with silence of their own. This psychological balance is what makes the unease bearable. It acknowledges fear without overwhelming. It teaches us, softly, that unease can be endured, that the disturbing can be walked through, that even in silence we can choose kindness. Unease also comes from the way the episode reframes courage. In most adventures, Finn charges forward, his bravery loud and decisive. But here, courage becomes quieter. It is measured not in battles won, but in steps taken into silence. The psychology of this shift is profound. We are used to associating courage with action, with noise, with victory. Yet the unsettling house demands a different kind of strength, the ability to endure stillness, to sit with discomfort, to respect boundaries rather than break them. For many viewers, this recognition stirs unease because it challenges our expectation of what it means to be heroic. Finn's choice to return the key rather than keep it illustrates this perfectly. The act is small, almost unnoticed, yet psychologically it carries immense weight. To resist curiosity, to deny possession, is to embrace humility. That humility unsettles because it reminds us of limits. We cannot know every story. We cannot hold every secret. For minds that long for answers, this denial feels incomplete, unsatisfying. And yet it is precisely in that incompleteness that the episode's meaning lies. Unease comes not from loss, but from acceptance. Jake's perception of the house as lonely also deepens the psychological experience. Loneliness is a universal fear, whether acknowledged or not. To assign loneliness to a building personifies emptiness, giving it emotional presence. Suddenly, the silence is not just silence, it is yearning. This recognition unsettles because it forces us to see absence not as neutral, but as aching. It reminds us of our own capacity for loneliness, of the spaces in our lives that might feel abandoned or forgotten. The house mirrors those inner spaces, and by walking through it, Finn and Jake walk through us as well. The psychology of unease thrives on recognition. The crooked toy, the frozen clock, and the 2 cups at the table. These are all things we recognize from our own lives. They are not fantastical objects, but ordinary ones placed in extraordinary context. That familiarity makes them effective. We know what these objects mean, and that knowledge unsettles us when the objects behave in ways they should not. A toy should bring joy, not dread. A clock should move, not freeze. Cups should hold warmth, not silence. The disturbance is born from the betrayal of expectation, and our minds cannot easily let that go. Another subtle psychological thread is the balance between presence and absence. We never see the people who once lived in the house, but their presence is everywhere, in the warmth of a cup, the wear on a toy, the faint handwriting on a photograph. This paradox unsettles us because it reminds us that presence lingers even after people are gone. It is comforting, but it is also eerie. We realize that absence is never complete. It always leaves traces. The house becomes a living example of how memory haunts space, and that haunting unsettles because it feels true to life. The psychology of unease also leans into empathy. We do not fear for Finn and Jake's safety in the usual way. Instead, we fear for what the house has endured. Our unease comes from compassion, our recognition that loss and loneliness can shape a place as much as they shape a person. To empathize with a house is strange, but that strangeness is exactly what makes it unsettling. We are invited to feel for something inanimate, to grant emotion to walls and objects. This extension of empathy blurs the line between animate and inanimate, unsettling our sense of what deserves care. Perhaps the most powerful psychological effect of the episode is its refusal to resolve. Stories often ease our unease by offering answers. The monster is defeated, the villain unmasked, the riddle solved. Here, no such resolution arrives. The tapping sound is never explained. The mural is never decoded. The photographs never reveal their subject. The unease remains open. lingering. Psychologically, this is challenging. Our minds crave closure. When closure is denied, we continue to think, to feel, to remember. The story lives on beyond the episode because it left its door unlatched. And yet, this lack of resolution carries its own lesson. It teaches us that unease is part of life, not always to be banished, but sometimes to be carried. The disturbing episode does not want us to conquer fear. It wants us to learn how to walk with it, to sit beside it, to treat it with the same respect Finn and Jake show the objects in the house. The psychology of unease is not meant to weaken us. It is meant to deepen us, to remind us that discomfort can coexist with care, that mystery can coexist with peace. When an episode leaves us with more questions than answers, it naturally invites theories. Adventure Time has always thrived on this balance, scattering fragments of lore across its colorful landscapes and leaving fans to gather them together. The disturbing episode we have been exploring feels like one of those fragments. It is a self-contained story, yet it vibrates with connections to the wider world of Ooh. To linger here is to wander not only through a lonely house, but through the echoes of Adventure Time's deepest mystery. One of the most common theories links the house and its imagery to the Mushroom War. The photographs, the broken clock, the unfinished ritual, all suggest a life interrupted. The Mushroom War was that interruption, the great catastrophe that tore one age apart and gave birth to another. The house in this reading is not simply a strange location, but a relic. It is a remnant of humanity's final days, preserved just enough to show the outlines of what was lost. The uncanny atmosphere arises because Finn and Jake are walking through a scar in time, a place where the past still breathes faintly, unwilling to release its hold. This theory gains strength when we consider the objects. The moth in the jar could symbolize fragile life, surviving the war, trapped but still alive. The mural with its faceless figures might be humanity's desperate rituals in the face of disaster, clinging to hope as the void swallowed their world. The music box single chime could represent the abrupt ending of the old age, a melody cut short before it could reach completion. Each object becomes a symbolic echo of humanity's collapse, reframed through the dreamlike logic of Ooh. Another theory suggests that the house is not tied to the Mushroom War at all, but to the magical forces that shaped Ooh afterward. In this interpretation, the distorted reflection, shifting scale, and ambiguous symbols are the work of residual magic. The house becomes a thin place where reality bends and echoes of other dimensions bleed through. The tapping sound might not have been physical at all, but the trembling of two worlds brushing against each other. This would explain why nothing is ever explained. The house is not hiding answers, but existing in a liminal state that cannot be fully understood. Some fans interpret the house as a psychological mirror for Finn and Jake themselves. The warped toy, the faceless mural, the distorted reflections, these could be external representations of their inner fears. Finn, still young and learning what it means to be a hero, sees himself in cracked mirrors and unfinished songs, symbols of identity not yet fully formed. Jake, older and more cautious, senses the loneliness of the house and recognizes his own fear loss. The episode, then, becomes less about a physical location and more about an inner journey, a dreamlike reflection of their own subconscious mind. There are even theories that the house is alive, not in the sense of being haunted by ghosts, but in the sense of being sentient. Its silence, its shifting spaces, its ability to respond to respect with gentleness, all of these hint at consciousness. Some suggest it is a magical construct designed to hold memory, a place built to preserve fragments of the past. Others propose it is simply an old house that, through years of abandonment and sorrow, developed a kind of spirit. Adventure Time often blurs the line between inanimate and animate, and the idea of a house with feelings is not so far-fetched in a world where candy people walk and ancient cosmic beings whisper from the stars. Each of these theories, whether tied to history, magic, psychology, or sentient, deepens the disturbing quality of the episode. They remind us that unease arises not only from what is seen, but from the vast field of possibilities that remain unseen. The house can be many things at once: a relic, a mirror, a spirit, a scar. Its mystery is what makes it so powerful. And beyond fan theories, the disturbing episode also connects to Adventure Time's broader lore in quieter ways. The faceless mural, for example, echoes imagery of the Lich, the great embodiment of death and destruction in The void at the center of the figures recalls the Lich's presence, always waiting at the edges of the story. Though the episode never mentions him, the connection feels natural. The unease of the house may be a whisper of his influence, a reminder that his shadow lingers in corners far beyond the main arcs of the show. The broken clock, too, resonates with the show's obsession with time. From the immortal Marceline to the eternal existence of the cosmic entity, Adventure Time constantly explores how time shapes and distorts life. A frozen clock in this context becomes more than an eerie image. It becomes a symbol of how time fails in how cycles of destruction and rebirth can stall, leaving fragments suspended. The disturbing quality of the clock is not just that it is broken, but that it suggests the world itself might not be stable. The idea of instability in time opens another path of interpretation. Some fans believe that certain locations in are fractured, where time itself buckled during or after the Mushroom War. These places exist slightly outside the normal flow, carrying fragments of different eras within their wall. The house may be one such fracture, where echoes of the past bleed into the present. This could explain why the photographs fade yet persist, why the moth stirs but never escapes, why the clock remains fixed at a late hour. The disturbing atmosphere, then, is not only about loss, but about being caught in a loop that will never resolve. This perspective also ties the episode to larger mythic themes in Adventure Time. Time loops and distortions appear in many forms throughout the series, from the cosmic antics of Prismo to the strange anomalies of the multiverse. In this broader context, the house becomes a small-scale echo of those greater truths. It reminds us that is not stable, but layered with fracture, each one holding pieces of stories that will never be whole again. The house is a personal version of the same instability that defines the cosmos. A quiet reminder that the strangeness of the universe lives not only in the stars, but in the rooms we enter and the chairs we sit upon. Other fans have looked at the mural with its faceless figures and seen not only echoes of the Lich, but also parallels to the elemental forces that shape The four elements, fire, ice, candy, and slime, often dominate the mythology of the land. The dark center of the mural could represent the void that existed before these forces emerged, or the silence that waits after they have consumed one another. The blank faces might symbolize identity erased by elemental imbalance, a warning that when power outweighs individuality, the world becomes faceless. In this sense, the disturbing quality of the mural ties directly to the ongoing struggle of balance in Adventure Time's larger story. There are also theories that connect the moth to Princess Bubblegum's experiments and the strange hybrid creatures she sometimes creates. A moth trapped in a jar may be more than a simple insect. It could be a relic of science gone astray, a symbol of how attempts to control life can result in confinement rather than freedom. If this is true, the house may have once belonged to a scientist or experimenter in the post-war years, someone whose quiet work left behind fragments of unease. This interpretation fits with the Adventure Time's ongoing theme that the pursuit of knowledge and power often comes at a cost, leaving behind scars that echo long after their creators are gone. A different school of thought suggests the house belongs to no one specific, but represents the universal experience of grief. The tapping, the silence, the half-finished object, all could be metaphors for the ways grief lingers. A grieving mind hears echoes where none exist. It finds comfort and unease in objects left behind. It clings to rituals that feel incomplete. In this reading, the episode is not about war, magic, or cosmic forces, but about the psychology of loss. The house becomes grief made visible, a structure where absence is louder than present. Finn and Jake's journey through it mirrors the journey through mourning, confusion, silence, discovery, respect, and eventually leaving while carrying the memory. Yet the beauty of Adventure Time, that no single theory needs to be correct. The house can be a war relic, a magical fracture, a symbol of grief, a mirror of Finn and Jake's own subconscious, or all of these at once. Ooh is a world built on layers, and each theory adds another shade to its depth. The disturbing episode thrives on this openness. It refuses to pin itself to one meaning, knowing that its power lies in the multiplicity of interpretation. Some fans even connect the episode to the multiverse. If the house is a thin space where reality bends, then perhaps the tapping is not from within the walls, but from another world pressing against ours. The distorted reflections could be glimpses of those parallel selves, faint images bleeding through. This would connect the episode directly to Adventure Time's larger cosmic arcs, where beings like the cosmic owl, Prismo, and the Lich demonstrate that Ooh is only one thread in a far larger tapestry. In this context, the unease is not only personal, but cosmic. The house becomes a reminder that our world is fragile, one of many, and that echoes of other worlds may slip through when we least expect them. The most fascinating thing about these theories is how they overlap. A war relic can also be a magical fracture. A symbol of grief can also be a mirror of Finn's own mind. The house resists one answer because it is meant to. Its disturbing quality is inseparable from its ambiguity. By leaving so much unspoken, the episode forces us to sit in that ambiguity, to feel rather than to know. This is why it lingers. It becomes not just a story in Ooh, but a story we carry into our own reflections, filling its silence with our own thoughts. To understand the unsettling aura of the house, many turn to the show's most enduring shadow, the Lich. The Lich is never named in this episode, but his influence runs like a quiet current beneath it. The void at the center of the mural resembles the emptiness that follow in his wake. The stillness of the rooms mirrors the way life drains from places he touches. Even the photographs, their fading faces, echo his obsession with erasure, the stripping away of identity until nothing remains but silence. The theory suggests that this house may have once been brushed by his presence, leaving it tainted, not in a loud or violent way, but in a whisper that lingers long as past. Marceline's story also brushes against the imagery here. As one of the few beings who lived through the Mushroom War, she carries memory where others cannot. The abandoned toys, the jars, the faded murals, these could all be echoes of what she might have seen as a child wandering through ruin. Some fans speculate that the house represents not a literal place, but a dream or memory of Marceline's past, refracted through the surreal logic of Ooh. In this interpretation, Finn and Jake stumble into a psychic scar, walking not through stone walls, but through the residue of Marceline's grief. This would explain the childlike objects imbued with unease, and why the house feels less like a structure and more like an emotional landscape. There are even connections drawn to Ice King. His fractured mind, burdened by the crown's magic, often drifts into places where memory and reality blur. The house, with its unfinished rituals and broken timepiece, feels like the externalization of such a mind. Some theorists suggest the episode foreshadows his role as a tragic figure, hinting at how places and people in Ooh can carry echoes of madness and loss. The distorted reflections that Finn sees in the glass could be read as symbols of Ice King's own distorted self-image, fractured between Simon Petrikov and the being he has become. Theories also extend into the cosmic, reaching toward entities like the cosmic owl. The owl's dreams are famously prophetic, often blending unsettling imagery with future truths. The disturbing episode could itself be read as a dream-given form, a moment where Finn and Jake step into the owl's domain without realizing. The tapping, the silence, the sense of incompletion, these could be fragments of prophecy, symbols meant to prepare them for future trial. This interpretation aligns with the series' tendency to hide foreshadowing in strange and symbolic places, trusting viewers to connect the threads only much later. Some fans have gone further still, suggesting that the house is an echo of the nightosphere. While not filled with demons or chaos, it embodies the same qualities of unease and disorientation. The endless halls, the distorted scale, the way ordinary objects take on sinister qualities. These are traits that align with the nightosphere's dreamlike horror. If this theory holds, the house may be a fragment of that realm that bled into an outpost of unease tethered to a world of greater darkness. This would explain why Finn and Jake's usual tools of bravery and humor feel blunted here. The rules of reality are different, closer to nightmare than to daydream. Another compelling theory draws on the elemental imbalance that underpins much of Oo's lore. The frozen clock and the stagnant rooms may symbolize the suffocating grip of ice. The moth in the jar, longing for freedom, may represent the restless burn of fire, restrained and unable to move. The faceless mural, with its blank unity, recalls the conformity of candy, and the unfinished chime of the music box, sticky and unresolved, may connect to the slow, clinging quality of slime. In this reading, the house becomes a miniature reflection of the elements at war, each fragment of imagery echoing the ways they distort when left unchecked. This interpretation deepens the disturbing quality, suggesting that what Finn and Jake wander through is not only memory, but an allegory of imbalance that threatens all of Ooh. Still other theories frame the episode as a parable about memory and legacy. The photographs beneath the chair, the cups at the table, the worn toy, all suggest lives that once carried love and routine. By discovering them, Finn and Jake become witnesses, and by returning the key, they become caretakers of that memory. Some fans argue that this is the true purpose of the episode, to show that the disturbing atmosphere is not malicious, but mournful. The unease is not meant to frighten, but to remind us that remembrance is heavy, and that honoring the past is as important as moving forward. Each of these theories adds another layer to the episode, and what makes them so compelling is that none of them exclude the others. The house can be at once a scar of the Mushroom War, a fragment of cosmic instability, a reflection of Marceline's grief, a foreshadowing of Ice King's tragedy, a whisper of the Lich, and a parable of memory. Adventure Time thrives on this multiplicity. Its disturbing moments are not puzzles with the single answers, but dreamscapes that invite us to imagine endlessly. And so, as we linger in these theories, the unease of the episode grows more intricate. It is no longer about silence alone, but about history, psychology, magic, and myth all woven together. The house becomes a crossroad where every thread of Adventure Time's lore could meet, each theory shining its own dim lantern into the same endless corridor. When we gather all of these theories together, a pattern begins to emerge. The disturbing episode is less about one truth than about many truths coexisting. That is part of its power. The house does not settle into a single story because Ooh itself cannot. The land is built from layers of apocalypse, rebirth, magic, grief, and wonder. To try to name one explanation would be to simplify something that was never meant to be simple. Theories about the Mushroom War highlight the fragility of the past, reminding us that catastrophe leaves fragments that never fully heal. Theories about magical fractures or the nightosphere emphasize the instability of reality, how Ooh is always just one step away from dream or nightmare. Theories about Marceline, Ice King, or the Lich tie the episode to characters we know and love, deepening its emotional resonance by linking the unease to their struggles. And the theories about grief and memory remind us that gaze does not always point outward. It can also point inward, into the hidden places of our own hearts. This breadth of interpretation is exactly what makes the episode feel alive long after the screen fades. It is not simply a haunted house story. It is a mirror that reflects whatever fears or fascinations we bring to it. If we fear loneliness, the empty rooms speak to us. If we fear loss of identity, the cracked reflections unsettle us. If we carry curiosity about Oo's history, the photographs and mural beckon with unanswered questions. Each viewer finds a different thread, and in finding it, they weave themselves into the fabric of the story. The show's creators have often said that Adventure Time is about imagination as much as it is about plot. This episode embodies that philosophy. By withholding clear explanation, it encourages us to imagine. Theories become part of the experience, and the lore expands not because the episode told us everything, but because it trusted us to dream into its silence. In this way, the disturbing episode is both unsettling and generous. It disturbs us, but it also invites us to participate in the act of creation. There is also something deeply symbolic about the way Finn and Jake respond. They do not attempt to solve the mystery. They do not destroy the house or claim its artifacts. Instead, they move gently, respecting what they do not understand and leaving the key behind. Their behavior reflects one final theory, that the house is a lesson about restraint, humility, and the acceptance of mystery. In a world where so many stories are about conquering or unveiling, this one reminds us that sometimes the bravest act is to walk away quietly, honoring what was without trying to claim it as our own. If we read the episode this way, the disturbing quality becomes a form of wisdom. The unease is not meant to unsettle us endlessly, but to guide us toward patience and reverence. It shows us that not all questions need answers, that not all silence need filling. Adventure Time, with its playful surface and apocalyptic depths, often teaches through paradox. Here it teaches us that disturbance can be gentle, and that mystery can be a gift. In the wider lore of O, this lesson connects to countless other arcs. Marceline's long life teaches her to live with unanswered questions about her past. Ice King's fractured mind shows the consequences of forcing answers where only silence remains. The Lich embodies the danger of reducing everything to one conclusion: death. Against these figures, Finn and Jake's quiet respect for the house feels like a counterbalance. They choose not to force meaning, but to carry unease as it is. This choice resonates across the entire series, aligning the disturbing episode with Adventure Time's deepest theme. Even the cosmic beings fit this pattern. Prismo, the cosmic owl, the entities beyond time, they all exist in ambiguity, their motives and powers never fully explained. The disturbing episode places Finn and Jake in a smaller version of the same mystery. They face something incomprehensible and learn not to master it, but to walk alongside it. In this sense, the house is a microcosm of U itself, a place filled with fragments, whispers, and unanswered questions, where the task is not to conquer, but to witness. As the theories swirl, one truth remains. The disturbing episode endures because it leaves room for history, room for myth, room for personal reflection. Its darkness is never absolute, because within that darkness lies space for our own imagination to take root. That is why fans return to it again and again, offering new theories, new connections, new ways of seeing. The unease never fully settles because it was never meant to. By the time Finn and Jake step back into the light outside the house, the audience has been changed as much as they have. Theories will continue to grow. Was it a relic, a fracture, a memory, a spirit? But the house itself will never answer. And that is the final gift. By refusing to tell us, it allows the disturbing episode to remain forever alive, forever mysterious, forever whispering in the quiet corners of ooh. When the episode ends and Finn and Jake step out into the fading light, the unease does not vanish with. Instead, it lingers, like the aftertaste of a dream, like the soft echo of a note that has already fallen silent. This lingering is what makes the disturbing episode so powerful. It does not seek to shock us in the moment and then fade away. It settles into us quietly, planting seeds of thought that continue to grow long after the credits roll. The first echo is emotional. Many episodes of Adventure Time leave us smiling or laughing, or feeling the thrill of adventure. This one leaves us subdued, thoughtful, maybe even a little restless. We lie in bed afterward, thinking of the moth in the jar, or the faceless mural, or the key returned to its place. Each image has weight, and that weight follows us into the night. It is not heavy enough to crush us, but it is heavy enough to stay, like a stone we keep in our pocket, rubbing its edges without ever wearing it down. Another echo is imaginative. The silence of the house does not close the story, it opens it. We imagine the lives that once filled those rooms, the voices that once echoed down those hallways. We imagine what the tapping might have been, or what the mural once meant, or who left the photographs behind. The episode hands us fragments and invites us to build the rest. In this way, the disturbance becomes fertile ground for imagination. It sparks creativity precisely because it does not answer every question. There is also a moral echo, a soft lesson woven into the unease. By choosing not to disturb the house further, Finn and Jake model a kind of respect that lingers with us. We carry the reminder that not every mystery is ours to solve, not every silence is ours to break. The lesson may not be shouted, but it resonates quietly, reshaping the way we think about curiosity and restraint. The episode teaches without preaching, leaving the insight to bloom in us naturally, like a seed watered by time. The disturbing episode also leaves behind a cultural echo in the larger world of Adventure Time. Among fans, it is one of the stories most often discussed, precisely because it resists easy answers. Theories continue to multiply, interpretations continue to evolve, and the episode remains alive in conversation. In this sense, it is less like a finished piece of art and more like an ongoing collaboration between creators and viewers. Its disturbing quality is not a flaw, but a design, an open door through which imagination can continue to wander. Even the smallest echoes matter. The single chime of the music box, for example, is so slight that it could be forgotten. Yet many who watch the episode find it sticks with them more than louder moments from other adventures. That faint note becomes a reminder of how delicately unease can be crafted. We remember it because it was incomplete, and in remembering, we carry it forward. In this way, the disturbing episode teaches us something profound about memory, that sometimes the smallest details last the longest. Finally, the echo of the episode lies in its contrast. Adventure Time is known for its bright colors, its candy people, its silly song. Against this background, the disturbing episode shines like a shadow cast across sunlight. It reminds us that the whimsical and the unsettling can coexist, and that the depth of ooh lies in this coexistence. Without the shadows, the light would not feel as bright. Without the disturbing episode, the joyful ones would not feel as joyful. The echo lies in balance, in the way this story deepens every other story around it. The echoes also move inward, into the realm of dreams. Many who watch the episode find that it lingers in their sleep, resurfacing not as nightmares, but as quiet reminders. A hallway slightly too long, a toy box that creaks in memory, a faint tapping sound in the dark of the night. These fragments travel with us because the episode speaks the language of dream. It does not give us full story, only images and impressions. That is precisely how dreams live within us, half-finished, symbolic, waiting for interpretation. By mimicking the shape of a dream, the episode ensures that its atmosphere endures in the landscape of our minds long after the story ends. Another lasting impression is the way the episode shifts our understanding of ooh itself. Adventure Time often feels whimsical, even silly, with its candy kingdoms and playful song. But this quiet disturbance reminds us that beneath the sweetness lies a history of scars. Ooh is a land born from catastrophe, and though much of it has healed into color and laughter, the shadows remain. The house and its symbols remind us that the past is never fully erased. This insight deepens our appreciation of the series, showing us that joy and unease are not separate worlds, but parts of the same tapestry. There is also a personal echo that viewers carry with them. For some, the house reminds them of places they have seen in real life, abandoned homes, forgotten corners, objects left behind by people who moved on. For others, it resonates as a metaphor for their own memories, the things they keep locked away, half forgotten, yet still alive. In this way, the disturbing episode connects to our personal lives, not just the fictional land of ooh. It unsettles us because it feels familiar, because we too have silent rooms in the landscapes of our hearts. The disturbing episode also leaves an impression through restraint. Many shows create lasting fear by showing too much. Monsters, gore, loud frights. But Adventure Time takes the opposite approach. By holding back, By whispering instead of shouting, it creates an unease that lingers longer. This is an important lesson, not only for storytelling, but for life. Sometimes the quietest things, the silences, the absences, the things left unsaid, are what shape us most. The impression of this episode is lasting because it respects the power of subtlety. Another echo is communal. The episode has become a touchstone for fans, a story that sparks discussion and interpretation across time. Viewers share their theories, their feelings, their own echoes, and in doing so, the episode becomes a gathering. The unease it creates becomes less isolating because it is shared. We realize that others too have felt disturbed by the moth in the jar, or unsettled by the mural, or haunted by the soundless clock. The lasting impression here is one of connection. Even in unease, we are not alone. And finally, there is the echo of beauty. Strange as it may sound, the disturbing episode is beautiful in its way. The dust floating in the lights, the crack in the mirror, the silent chair at the center of the room. These are images of melancholy, but also of delicate grace. They remind us that beauty is not always bright and cheerful. Sometimes it is quiet, fragile, and tinged with sorrow. The lasting impression of the episode is not only that it unsettles us, but that it shows us how unease can coexist with beauty. Shadows can make the light more precious. When we think of Adventure Time as a whole, this episode holds a peculiar place in its legacy. It is not one of the grand finales or the loud climax, yet many fans recall it with sharp clarity. That is the strength of echoes. They do not need to be loud to be remembered. They only need to resonate in the right key. The disturbing episode hums in a key of stillness and ambiguity, and that tone vibrates long after other episodes fade from memory. It also reshapes how we remember Finn and Jake. So often, they are the bold adventurers, the comic relief, the bringers of joy. But here, they become quiet companions in unease. Their gentleness, their restraint, their willingness to leave things untouched, these choices broaden their characters in ways we do not forget. The impression lingers that they are not only heroes of action, but heroes of patience. And in remembering this, we begin to see their later journeys differently, as if this quiet encounter prepared them for the subtler trials of maturity. The episode leaves its mark on the rhythm of the series itself. Adventure Time often moves quickly, bouncing from joke to fight to heartfelt moment. This story slows that rhythm, stretches it into long silences, and lets us feel the weight of time. Once we experience that change in tempo, we cannot unhear it. We notice silence more in later episodes. We notice the way the show occasionally pauses, letting images carry meaning without words. The disturbing episode becomes a lens that changes how we watch the rest of the series, teaching us to listen for the quiet beneath the noise. Another lasting impression comes from the way the episode shapes fan creativity. Countless theories, fan art, and discussions continue to grow from its ambiguity. Some draw the house in vivid detail, others paint the moth or the mural, others write stories filling in the gap. The episode becomes a seedbed of imagination, proof that sometimes leaving questions unanswered generates more art than giving answers ever could. Its legacy is not only within the show, but outside it, in the ripples it sends to its audience. The disturbing episode also deepens the philosophical undercurrent of Adventure Time. At its core, the series is about resilience after catastrophe, about finding joy in the ruins of a broken world. This quiet, unsettling story underscores that philosophy by showing us what remains when joy is absent. It forces us to sit with the ruins, to feel them fully, to acknowledge that they exist. Well, only then can the joy of other episodes shine as brightly as it does. The impression we carry is that Adventure Time does not shy away from sadness. It embraces it as part of the larger whole. For some viewers, the lasting impression is deeply personal. They find themselves returning to the episode when they feel grief, they feel lonely, when they sit in silence. The house becomes a symbol not just of but of their own inner lives. It becomes a place they revisit in memory, walking again through its hallways, hearing again the faint tapping, and remembering that unease does not need to be feared. It can be honored, respected, and even cherished. The episode becomes part of their emotional landscape, a touchstone for reflection. The echoes also ripple into how the show is remembered in broader culture. When people speak of Adventure Time's depth, they often point to episodes like this. It proves that the show was never just whimsy or silliness. It was also capable of profound subtlety. This impression has shaped how critics and fans alike talk about the series, cementing its reputation as something far more layered than its surface might suggest. The disturbing episode stands as evidence that children's animation can hold mystery, melancholy, and philosophy with as much grace as joy and laughter. And at the deepest level, the lasting impression of this episode is its reminder that unease can be gentle. Not every disturbing thing must harm. Some can guide, some can teach, some can hold silence in such a way that we learn to hear ourselves more clearly. That is the legacy the story leaves. Unease, not as enemy, but as companion, walking quietly beside us long after the tale is done. The most delicate echo of all lies in the way the episode touches our sense of time. It reminds us that time does not always move in straight lines. Sometimes it pauses, sometimes it loops, sometimes it lingers in places that seem forgotten. The frozen clock, the dust on the furniture, the half-played music box, they are not just symbols of the house, but of life itself. We too carry moments that never resolve, memories that stand still, songs that end before their melody is complete. The impression the episode leaves is that these fragments are not failures, but part of the pattern. They make us who we are. This is why the disturbing episode is so beloved. It whispers to us that unease has value, that silence has meaning. The mystery is not emptiness, but fullness waiting to be felt. In a world that often demands answers, it dares to leave us with a question, and in doing so, it respects the depth of our imagination. It does not hand us clarity. It hands us wonder, and that wonder remains long after the screen fades to black. The episode's echoes also remind us of the companionship at the heart of Adventure Time. Even in silence, even in unease, Finn and Jake face it together. They do not split apart. They do not fight one another. They do not let fear drive them away. They move carefully, side by side, until the story carries them back into the light. This companionship becomes one more lasting impression, that we need not face unease alone. Whether with friends or with memories or with our own inner courage, we can walk through even the strangest houses without losing ourselves. The legacy of the disturbing episode is that it lingers in layers. For some, it is a haunting memory of childhood, the kind of story that taught them to feel fear gently. For others, it is a philosophical meditation, a reminder of loss and impermanence. For others still, it is a piece of lore, a fragment of Oo's vast mythology. No matter the perspective, the episode lasts because it refuses to vanish. Like the tapping in the walls, it continues faintly in the background of our thoughts, long after the adventure has ended. And perhaps that is its final gift. By lingering, it teaches us that not everything must be resolved before sleep. Sometimes it is enough to carry the questions with us, to let them rest beside us like companions in the dark. In the quiet space between certainty and mystery, we find a softer kind of peace. The peace of knowing that unease can be part of the dream and that the dream can still be beautiful. So as we drift from the story tonight, let the echoes settle softly around you. Let the moth rest in its jar. Let the music box keep its single note. Let the chair guard its photographs. Let the mural remain faceless. And let the silence speak as it always has. Carry these images with you, not as burdens, but as lanterns, lighting your way into sleep. Adventure Time has always been a tapestry of joy and sorrow, of laughter and quiet dread. This disturbing episode is one of its darker threads, but it is woven with such care that it only makes the whole tapestry richer. To remember, it is to remember that light and shadow are inseparable, that unease and comfort can sit side by side, and that even the strangest silences can hold meaning worth cherishing. And now, as we close our eyes and let the story fade, may its echoes guide you gently into your own dream, where questions can linger without answers and silence can bloom into rest. Good night.